Chris Blair, it is going to be a massive showdown between Alabama and LSU, but I think we're pretty much used to that at this point.
Yeah, we are used to it, Roger. Good to be joined with you. Looking forward to going to Tuscaloosa and being there for this atmosphere once again. But who'd have thunk it? You know, a lot of people around college football, I think, at certain points this year, left Alabama out of the equation, left LSU out of the equation, and here we are, another matchup where implications on the SEC West, ultimately possibly the SEC, and who knows, college football playoff. So it's amazing how these two teams have both gotten better each and every week. But to hear the national, media, you can't do that anymore. You got to be ready to go week number one. So again, as I said, who'd thunk it?
Absolutely. And looking at LSU, lost in week one against Florida State, also lost early on in SEC play to Ole Miss. And everyone, like you said, kind of forgot about LSU, even when they're trailing against Missouri. But kind of since that Missouri game, what have you seen from the LSU Tigers?
Well, it's been a massive improvement defensively. I mean, you look at the offense in week number one, that necessarily, they didn't hit a lot of big plays, Roger, but that didn't necessarily lose the game. It was the inability to stop Florida State's offense. It was a complete, loss of defense against Ole Miss. They couldn't stop the Rebels at all. You get one or two stops in that game and you score 49 points on the road in the SEC, you should win that, and you would have won that. But since that point, I think you nailed it. Since the second half of Missouri, because Missouri came out first three drives, went right through LSU's defense with no problem, and suddenly they were able to get a stop. Harold Perkins with that interception slowed them down. I think stumbled Missouri just enough that then Jaden Daniels in this LSU offense, which is putting up just incredible video game numbers, were able to get back into the game, then take control of the game. And then in the second half, I think LSU's defense really disrupted what Brady Cook and his offense wanted to do. They were able to take really Luther Burton out of the mix in that second half. And since then, had a great performance defensively against Auburn. They were certainly outmatched, but they handled Army with no problem with a 62-0 shutout victory. So there's still a lot of work to be done. The offense has been pretty consistent most of the year. But the defense has got to get better, and their biggest challenge, obviously, will come against Alabama in Bryant-Denny Stadium.
How key is Harold Perkins to this LSU defense?
Well, finding the right spot for him. And I think, it's easy for us to say, well, he ought to do this every single game. But I think that's not giving a lot of credit to your opponent, because they obviously are game planning for Harold Perkins Jr. He's just that type of athlete that you have to do that. So I think LSU, as LSU's opponents have tried to figure out how to work against Perkins, I think, truthfully, LSU's had to figure out defensively where they want him to be and what his plan is against each and every opponent. His best attribute is getting after the quarterback, or certainly getting back into the offensive backfield and causing disruption. And here of late, they found a way to have him do both. He's kind of the nickel position, I guess, if you will. Again, there's been so much depletion to LSU's secondary, a weak secondary coming into the year, as it were, and now losing players. So he's had to sit back in coverage as well and handle that as part of his responsibility. But when he gets to pin his ears back and come after the offensive backfield, that's where he's most dangerous. But again, I think LSU still, the last couple of games, he has disrupted games. His defense has impacted games, but they're still learning a little bit on the job.
As we talk early in the week, getting ready for Saturday, just what are some of those key injuries that are limiting LSU right now?
Well, the big one earlier this week, Mekhi Wingo out for the foreseeable future, had surgery during the off week, which everyone found out about in Coach Kelly's press conference on Monday. So that's a big loss. I mean, again, he was an All-American last year, kind of had to stand in there for the injured Mason Smith, who missed all of the season outside of a couple of plays in the opener a year ago. And really had been coming into his own and was a big part of the reason LSU's defense had really started to develop in the Missouri game and certainly in the Auburn game. So without him, that's a big anchored loss for LSU up front. Now they've got some players who've had plenty of time there, but without Mekhi Wingo, nobody wants to go into a game without your real anchor in the middle of that defensive front. And then in the secondary, I mean, Zy Alexander, interception against Army at the end of the first half. I'm sure if he had it to do over, you take the interception with the clock, triple zeros, take a knee, head to the locker room. He made a return attempt. He was pulled down from behind, and he also has suffered an injury. And again, he won't be available this weekend, and that's a big loss for an already depleted LSU secondary, which has struggled mightily this year. They knew coming into the year it was going to be their weakest position group, and it has been. And now, after some back-to-back games where they played much better, challenging for the football, doing a much better job of covering their area, whether it be zone or man-to-man, now you're just down with a lot of true freshmen that are certainly untested, that are going to be tested big time, baptized by fire, as they say, against Milroe and his receivers in Bryant-Denny Stadium. So it's tough. It's not as if LSU has a ton of critical injuries, Roger. It's just a matter of where they are. They are critical for this team this particular year.
And looking at the other side of the ball, obviously we saw what Jaden Daniels can do a season ago, played brilliantly against Alabama, leading to that win for LSU against the Crimson Tide. But we know he's off to a good start this season. What about the supporting cast, the running backs, the wide receivers, the tight ends? Who's helping him be most effective for that LSU offense?
Well, as you know, LSU is getting a lot of credit for their offense because of the numbers they're putting up, and not only top in categories in the SEC, both out of conference overall and in conference games, but they're leading a lot of categories across the country. I mean, it's a prolific offense, and it starts with Jaden Daniels. But I think what people sometimes lose is the emergence of the run game, which was really not available to start this season, and it's gotten steadily better and better as each week has gone along. And a lot of that has to do with, the offensive line, which we thought was a strength coming into this year. Took them a couple of games to get their footing under them, to be honest with you. I think they're playing much better now over the last 4 or 5 weeks. And then Logan Diggs, the transfer from Notre Dame. We didn't know what kind of impact he was going to have. But now, he's you can almost pencil him in for close to 100 yards rushing every game. And then you throw on top of that Jaden Daniels, who, again, has the ability to extend plays with his feet and make the throw downfield. You also have him in design runs where he's just a great runner. He's able to elude tacklers. He's got deceiving speed. And so I think the running game, along with all the receivers that are uber talented, don't get me wrong, I think that's what's made this LSU defense a little tougher. I mean, it's not as if teams can come in now and say, look, we're just going to try to take away Neighbors, or we'll try to take away Thomas to make another receiver beat us. If you're going to drop back in coverage, LSU is more than happy to line it up and run the football. And to be honest with you, I don't think that's a weapon they had for the most part consistently in last year's team. So I think Logan Diggs and the offensive line deserve a lot of credit. But Jaden Daniels is the straw that stirs this drink. Make no mistake.
I think last year in our interview, we talked a lot about Brian Kelly, his first year at LSU, talking about the family and all the different things about his transition to Baton Rouge. But obviously, a great first year, wins the SEC West. As he's in year two, midway in year two, how do you continue to see him make this program in his own light?
Well, to your point, I think people knew when you get to a program like LSU, you will fit if you win. And so year number one, he was able to go out and do that, win the SEC West. And, here has himself in a position again to battle for an SEC West crown, certainly be in the mix. But I think for Coach Kelly and his staff, which for the most part, you look at the two coordinators, they were able to keep both of those. There's some continuity there. I think there's less building the plane as it's headed down the runway. I think that really was what was taking place last year with new players, new coaches, new building. I mean, all the things they had to learn, where the closets are and where to put this and where to put that. So I think all of that's behind him now. So I think they're a lot more comfortable in the operation of the overall program. And again, I think it goes back to recruiting. He's mentioned they've used the transfer portal more than he would like in the first 2 years, but that was by necessity. But they're really banking on, really putting a push in recruiting to up those recruiting classes so that they have 2 or 3 years to develop players, as opposed to bringing in players out of the portal. No offense. You can do all the due diligence, but until you put them out there in front of, 90,000 plus at Bryant-Denny Stadium, you really don't know what you got. And so I think all of that is going back to the comfortability that Coach Kelly now has, along with the entire staff, for year number 2.
Well, we'll look forward to this matchup, the Alabama Crimson Tide, the LSU Tigers on Saturday. Chris, thank you so much for your time to give us a great scouting report on LSU. We look forward to seeing you in Tuscaloosa on Saturday. Thank you.
Always a great time. Looking forward to it. We'll shake hands and have a laugh or two. Thanks, Roger.